Hi, my name is Beverly Bellinger, and I am living in Kingston, New York, in a house that my husband and I had built about 2 years ago. And we had to actually build a yard once the construction was finished. And I thought it was a great opportunity to finally have the garden of my dreams. I've been gardening probably all of my life. I started with my mom when I was a kid in South Carolina, and I've gardened for all of my adult life. But I've never had the garden that I really wanted. There was always something slightly off or missing. It didn't quite capture the image that I carried in my heart. And I was trying to combine my gardening experience with my mom, which is so dear to me, and the southern experience of gardening into a northern garden. And I kept missing the feel of both worlds. So when we had to build a garden, I called Victoria because I've been going to her nursery for since she first opened. I've watched her build it with her husband, who was just a wonderful person, and I would chat with him about what he was doing sometimes. And I watched the whole project, and I got beautiful flowers there that I couldn't find anywhere else. So I knew that was the place I was going to go when it was time for the garden, because I trusted her vision. I've seen it over the years, and I knew that if anybody could understand what I wanted, it would be Victoria. So sure enough, she came over and we had a wonderful conversation, and I told her I wanted to be embraced by my garden. I wanted to live in the garden because my experience of gardens has always been that I had to go to the garden. I would come out of the house and go to the garden in some other place in the yard. So it never felt connected to me in the way that I wanted to feel like I was living in my garden, not just visiting it. And I told her that I wanted to be able to look out the window and see the garden. One of the things that I felt, one of the mistakes of my gardening design always was the garden was against the house, so you could only see it when you entered the yard. Once you were in the house, the garden disappeared. And I couldn't figure out how to fix that, how to make the garden my intimate space, not for the outside world. And Victoria had she understood right away what I wanted, that kind of vision of the garden always being present in my view. So we designed a house with this wrapped in windows so that every room has a view of the garden. And so she pushed the garden out to which I never would have thought of on my own. It's so obvious now to me. But she moved the garden away from the foundation of the house, the main part of the garden, out into the yard, so that it wraps around the house, and I see it all the time. I'm never not in the garden. And one of the funny parts of this, for this summer, I'm usually filling the house with flowers all the time. And this summer, I didn't feel that need because I was always in the garden. I was always looking at a bouquet without having to even clip it. And so we have less flowers in the house, but we also experience the flowers more than we ever have before because we're always seeing them. So the design of the garden has given us all such joy and practicality. And at the same time, it's a gift to my neighbors because it is pushed out to the outside of the yard. So the neighbors are always walking by, looking at it. Children are like trying to catch butterflies because they now can participate in the garden too, which I thought was really important. I wanted it to be a gift to the community. We were new here, and I didn't want the yard to feel like I was putting up a barrier. I wanted it to be welcoming but still private. And somehow Victoria figured that out. It feels very private when I'm sitting on my porch in the morning having a cup of coffee in this beautiful eastern light. It feels very, very private for me, but people pass by and they wave, but I don't really feel like they're imposing in my space. And other people stop by, and I've seen people pick a flower, which I always encourage because that's deadheading. You're saving me a job. So people sometimes will pick a flower and we end up talking. And I've met so many people because they stop to ask questions about the yard. Like, how did you do this? What is this? What's the concept? And one of the big concepts I had was I wanted to make a pollinating garden. I'm very invested in the environment. And we also have a lot of deer here. And I didn't want to put up a fence to keep the deer out because I love the deer. And they've been living here longer than me. So I didn't want to block them from passing through the yard, but I didn't want them to eat it. So Victoria came up with plants that deer tend not to eat. And I have to tell you, this is our first full summer of a full blown garden. Everything is blooming and thriving. The deer walk through it all the time, and they every now and then a doe may nibble on something, or a fawn may nibble, but then they keep going. It's not really what they want to eat. I'm sure that if they get really hungry, they'll eat anything, but everyone is asking me, how do you have flowers? Nobody in this community has flowers, and you have all these flowers. And I said, planted smart. So the yard is deer friendly, and I have so many pollinators. Sometimes I stand out here and the butterflies are flying around me and bees, and tears come to my eyes. I feel so happy because I feel like my garden is a part of nature. It didn't interfere with anything. It's a natural process. It feels like a refuge. The other night we had friends over for dinner. We were sitting out here, and it was a beautiful sunset. We were having a nice dinner, drinking wine and talking. And some deer come up because our yard here is planted with clover. And they came up and they ate some clover, which I'm happy about because they're like goats for me. They nibble it down and I don't have to mow because I'm technically lazy. So we came up and the deer were out there nibbling on the clover, and they've gotten so used to us. They kind of like, I can actually feed two of them from my hand now, but they had clover and then they walked away, and people were like, oh my God, this is like being in a refuge. Like the deer come to visit, they're eating in your garden, and then they walk away because they don't like the plants that you have. They're not eating them. So we were all like hysterical, and they were taking photographs, and she said, no, you could charge people to come visit your garden because they could come and have dinner with the deer. So Victoria has, and her crew, which they're just amazing. They really helped me collaborate because I gave her the list of all the plants that I've loved over the years, and she incorporated that into the design. She heard me. She knew I wanted that southern feel also because I really love southern gardening. So I have plants that remind me of the South, even if they're not quite what I grew up with. I have a magnolia. So there are things here that are very personal to me that tell a story, my personal story that no one else would know why I have it here, but it's fabulous for me. But the thing that I think I love most about working with Victoria is the collaboration. I love working with her. I love talking with her and her crew about plants. They know a lot. They taught me a lot. They take my suggestions without feeling criticized. So the garden feels organic and it feels filled with love. The crew loves the garden. When they come to work, they're very happy. They know everything now. We can sit out and have lunch together, talk gardening. So the whole experience has created for me, I call it my little piece of paradise. My daughter calls it Little Innisfree because that's a garden that we love, and this kind of incorporates a lot of those qualities. And my husband, who is never a gardener, retired this year, and he started hanging out when Victoria would come and he started listening. And I have to say, our marriage has changed because of the garden. We now garden together. And that is a gift that I never imagined or I wished for or expected. I just assumed he wouldn't be interested. And now he's totally into the garden and understanding more about plants. So for me, it's been a win-win. It's given me my dream garden. Now I have my dream husband. Um, so, it shows you that gardening is more than just planting flowers. It's the way of thinking about the environment and your place in it. What kind of impact do you want to leave? When somebody else takes over this yard in the future, I have made a book of, I have all of the plants listed, where they are. So I could hand it over to somebody else and they could pick it up and keep it going. Because I see this garden as a gift to the community, and I wanted to keep going that way, that it came from my heart, and it's my offering back to the environment, a garden filled with love. And I love Victoria.